All right. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. Welcome to Rsog School of Government. We are delighted to welcome you to the fourth In Conversation series, Sustainable Leadership Through Local Wisdom. I am honored to welcome our panelists today, all the way from Indonesia and New Zealand. Welcome to Malaysia. Selamat datang to the Honorable Prof. Dr. Eko Prasojo, Public Policy Reform Expert Faculty of Administrative Sciences, Universitas Indonesia. Kia ora, Mr. Honeypal, Director of Marketing, University of Otago. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Perfect, okay. And our moderator for today, Dr. Haji Muhammad Kamal Haji Harun, CEO of Rsog School of Government. Okay. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, the In Conversation series is a platform to bring together academia and practitioner to discuss pertinent and contemporary topics of general interest. So our discussion today, Sustainable Leadership Through Local Wisdom, the Indonesia and New Zealand experience, will explore how both countries use indigenous knowledge and local practices to promote sustainable leadership. Before we proceed, allow me to introduce our speaker's background. Professor Dr. Eko Prasojo graduated with a bachelor's degree in public administration from the Faculty of Social Political Sciences, Universitas Indonesia UI in 1995 with cum laude after being appointed as a civil servant lecturer at UI in 2006. Prof. Eko completed a master's program in public administration in 2000 and a doctoral program in public administration in 2003. At the same time, in the same university in Germany, graduating with cum laude. 10 years after being appointed as a civil servant lecturer at UI in July 2006, Prof. Eko was appointed by the Indonesian government as a permanent professor at the Department of Administrative Sciences, SIPUI, from 2016 to 2020. Prof. Eko has been the Dean of the Faculty of Administrative Sciences, Universitas Indonesia, head of the Independent National Bureaucratic Reform Team from 2015 to 2019, and from 2019 to 2024. And since 2021, he has been appointed as the Executive Secretary of the National Bureaucratic Reform Steering Committee. Next, we have Mr. Honeypal, the Director of Marketing at the University of Otago, New Zealand. Over the last 2 decades, Mr. Honey has held senior positions in the higher education sector and prior to this, management roles in media organizations in New Zealand and Australia. He has a business degree from AUT University and an MBA from the University of Auckland. He has worked extensively in management and leadership, strategy, stakeholders engagement, and community partnerships. Mr. Honey was born and raised in a small rural community among his Hanau family and their traditional lands before moving to the city. He belongs to the Central North Island Maori tribes of Gati Manawa and Gati Awa and Ti Arawa. Am I pronouncing it correctly? Okay, thank you. All right, so without further ado, I would like to pass this floor to Dr. Haji Muhammad Kamal Haji Harun, CEO, Rsog School of Government, to start and moderate the session.
Okay, thank you very much, Anis, and welcome everyone to Rsog School of Government, particularly to our honored speakers, Professor Dr. Eko Prasojo and also Mr. Honeypal. Thank you, sir, for being with us this morning. And Datuk Seri, Datuk Tuan-Tuan dan Puan-Puan, thank you for taking your time off from your busy schedule to be engaged with us in this morning's conversation. As the title goes, it is in conversation series, so we would be opening this session a lot on conversation among us. So make it an informal approach of presenting and having a communication so that we get all our ideas out and all our challenges that we want to express to be put on the platform of the conversation today. Now, as mentioned, I'm glad to have our two distinguished speakers to speak about sustaining leadership through local wisdom, their experiences in their organizations particularly was basically shared somewhat or other because we have another program actually going on. Yesterday, Bapak Iko and Mr. Hani was in the program in Malacca. So the challenges of influencing and getting things done through the understanding of the local context was made very apparent in that session yesterday. To make things happen, you will have to adapt rather than adopting totally. So those were some of the approaches, but I'm not going to dwell into that myself because I think it's worth listening. You should listen to the experience that the two of our speakers went through, particularly in running the organization. Okay, so if we can basically dwell into the areas is on what would be your experiences that you put in, or rather in putting up your organizational leadership and your leadership in general in deploying the local wisdom in the context of moving your organization. Why is it important? How does it basically influence or make things happen when you factor the issues of local wisdom in your challenges, and how do you ground it with your people, and how does it change, particularly now that we have the younger generations looking at wisdom perhaps in a different form or different manner. So if we can start, Bapak Eko and Mr. Hani, around these areas of your experiences, I think we'll start from there and we'll move from there. Okay? Is that okay by everybody? All right? Okay. Now, between Bapak Eko and Mr. Hani, who will want to go first? Yesterday, Bapak Eko started. Today, can we have Mr. Hani first to go? All right. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. Tēnā no tātou katoa, tēnei ka mihi ki a koutou, e tutu mai tēnei rangi, ka mihi ake rā ki ngā huhua mate, o tira ki a koutou katoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Good morning, everybody. Firstly, I wanted to open with a very brief acknowledgement in my language, the Māori language from New Zealand, Aotearoa New Zealand. I'm an Indigenous person from there, and in our customs we always like to pay respects to the people of the land, to acknowledge those who have passed, and to acknowledge those who are present in the room today. So thank you for allowing me to do that, and also acknowledgement to you all. Also an acknowledgement to the organisers of today's discussion. I, for context, wanted to open with a little bit of background about who Māori are, just to give you some context about my conversation today, so you have a bit of an understanding. Māori are the Indigenous people of New Zealand. At the moment, we're about 20% of the population in New Zealand. We number about 1 million people. So New Zealand's a tiny country, 5 million people. Māori are Polynesians, so they were seafarers. About a few thousand years ago, they originated in Taiwan probably, and then came across Micronesia, Melanesia to the South Pacific. Our closest relatives in the Pacific are Hawaiian, Tahitian, Cook Islanders, and people from Easter Island, Rapa Nui. So we're the Polynesian group of people that came out of Polynesia into those countries. New Zealand was settled at about 1250 AD, and so Māori have been there, a very indelible connection to the land of New Zealand for about nearly 1,000 years. And in that connection, we draw our values and our motivation to want to continue to nurture and ensure the success of our country, but in particular nurture our country, its environments, its people, and that is very much a part of our culture. So that's one element. We're Indigenous to New Zealand. We have a strong connection to the land, and it drives a lot of our thinking about how we as Indigenous people do things. The second part to that is that we are signatories to what's called the Treaty of Waitangi. And the Treaty of Waitangi was an agreement between Māori and the British Crown, which was signed in 1840. We were one of the few countries that signed a treaty during those colonial times. And what the treaty does is it allowed the British Crown to have governance over the people in New Zealand. But what it also did was it ensured that Māori, the Indigenous people, maintained sovereignty over their land for as long as they wanted to, sovereignty over their land, over their customs, over their villages, and over their treasures, their taonga. And the third thing it did was that it gave Māori, Indigenous people, the same rights as British subjects under the laws of Great Britain. So why am I telling you all of this? Because context is important to the Indigenous people of New Zealand, and it establishes the foundations for how we live our lives and the values that we have as people and the way that we go about implementing them. The treaty was signed nearly 200 years ago, and we've been in New Zealand for nearly a millennia, but still those things are critical to who we are as Indigenous people, those connections to the land and the partnerships that we have established. They're fundamental to how we think about doing things as Indigenous people. So I'm going to answer some of the question now after all of that. In terms of why is sustainable leadership important? What's the Indigenous element to that? Well, we've been on the land for 1,000 years. We know how to look after it. We know what keeps the rivers clean. We know what cycles the birds, their life cycles. We know how to encourage environmental sustainability because that's our land. We've been there for a long time. So taking the wisdom from Indigenous communities, and Māori are not a homogenous group of people. We are, we're pan-tribal people, and we all have customs. The geography in New Zealand is very different to here. There's alpine, mountainous, like the Southern Alps, we call it. It's like being in Switzerland or Germany with the alpine mountains. We also have subtropical rainforests. We have beaches. So the geography of the land is very different. And the people in New Zealand, the Polynesians that went there, the Māori, evolved their customs and their practices over time related to where they were. They were slightly nomadic, so they'd move around depending on where food was. So the wisdom that comes from those hundreds of years of being in that place helps to define our contribution now to sustainable practices and to better ways of doing things. They're not actually probably better ways of doing things. They're old ways of doing things, but through adaptation, as Prof. Eko will probably talk to, and through mindfulness, we can adopt those practices and make them useful in a modern context. The other part to sustainability is not just about environmentalism, and good leadership isn't just about being good to the environment. There's also elements of social good that come from that. Some of the values of Māori that we hold manaakitanga as an important value in our culture. Manaakitanga means to care or look after people. It's a social importance of looking after the whole rather than individualism. So through that, we also can find wisdom from local communities and how that and how to do that. I have to just ask Professor, shall I continue on or shall I stop and give someone? Okay.
I think there are some. Okay, there are some key points that was brought up by Hani. The fact that we are looking at how the community actually values their values and culture to be upheld in all of the construction of moving the community forwards, either through leadership or perhaps even policy construct. And you were mentioning about the social goods, which is the values that is being upheld by the Maori to care for the people rather than going for an individualistic approach to be incorporated. So I think we'll hold on that values and then we'll see how that translation is being done in perhaps organization or public policy construct on the second part. Can we share from Pak Iko first? Now, how are the indigenous elements being taken into account and why is it important, especially in leading your organization or in leading your public policies construct? If you can share that with us. Silakan, Pak Iko.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Kamal. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera. Alhamdulillah, hamdan kasiran thayyiban mubarakan fih, mubarakan alaihi kama yuhibbu rabbuna wa yardah. Asyhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la syarikalah wa asyhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu la nabiyya ba'dah. Allahumma shalli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. Ini juga bagian daripada local wisdom, Bapak Ibu sekalian. Local wisdom tadi karena Pak Paul bicara dalam bahasa Maori sebagai pembukaan, kia ora. Nah, saya juga sebenarnya itu kan doa kita ya, doa kita untuk keselamatan itu ya. Apalagi ini hari Jumat ya, supaya nilai-nilai budaya kita itu bisa termanifestasi di dalam kehidupan kita itu. Jadi sebenarnya sebagian besar saya lihat bangsa Indonesia ini, bangsa Malaysia ini kan orang Islam ya. Sebenarnya yang kita maksudkan local wisdom adalah termasuk juga nilai-nilai Islam, kebaikan-kebaikan Islam yang sekarang ini banyak ditinggalkan karena kita terlalu berorientasi pada Western. Jadi ini cocok sekali kita bahas pada hari ini ya terkait dengan local wisdom. Okay, Indonesia is unitary state but decentralized, fully decentralized. Local government has, I think, most of authority of the governments to serve the public services to the community and citizens. So why Indonesia needs local wisdom? Because with decentralizations, local government has to understand what is the expectation, the needs, the institutions, the values, the traditions of Indonesian citizens. Indonesia is very diverse, you know. We have 1,340 ethnies, suku bangsa. So you can imagine. And we have 715 languages, local languages. What amazing is we speak with same language in the national level, in education, in market, in the community, Indonesian language. This is the strength of Indonesia. We have very diversity in a sense of ethnicity and languages, but we speak one language. So every ethnic should speak Indonesian language, because with national language, we can understand each other. This is the integration factors of Indonesians community and citizens. They speak the same language. Very important, I think. The strength of Indonesia. So local government, local wisdom means that you have to govern with your values, your traditions, and also your institutions. So in Indonesia, we have many local institutions. For example, West Sumatra, they have Nagari. Nagari is the community like Maori in New Zealand. They know very much about the condition of citizens, about the traditions, about the weakness and strength of the community, and so on. They can be used by the governments to program poverty alleviation, for example. They know exactly where is the pure society living. So this is very effective way. We use the data provided by the Nagari, for example. So we have also Desa Pekraman village in Bali. And we have also some others indigenous village in Indonesia, very rich. And we have also local values. For examples, we have Gotong Royong, cooperation, collaborations. We have also Musyawarah, deliberations, and so on. So we have also Trihita Karana in Bali. Trihita Karana is the balances between gods, others, and also the environmental. This is very important for environmental policy, the sustainable developments. So the balance between gods, humans, and also the environmentals. And we have other values in Kalimantan, Sulawesi, as well as in Lombok and so on. So that's why we have to use local wisdom, because we are decentralized. This is the opportunity for local government to find their own way. So to find their own governance, local governance. Not just copy, just adopt Western values, Western institution, and so on. So the problem, the concept is coexistence between the Western public administration, Western public values, and local wisdom, the coexistency. This is the art of managing coexistency between the local wisdom, local values, local institution, and Western values. The context. And the second concept is adaptation, not adoption. We adapt, not adopt. Adopt means that we taking all the instrument, the values, for example, from British or from Germans or from Dutch, because we have also Dutch legacy in our public administrations. Malaysia has also British legacy on public administration, but we have to customize. We have to adapt with the original local wisdom in Malaysia. Yeah, so that means we create the coexistency, not only follow the Western way, because we have ASEAN way of public administrations. So I chair in a university non-Western public administrations. So since 10 years ago, I think we conduct some research in the concept of non-Western public administrations. So we conducted research in Confucius values in public administration in Korea, in Japan. So they follow the local wisdom of integrity, loyalty, seniority, and so on. So the Confucian's values. So we also now we are conducting research on Islamic public values. How we can find Islamic values to be adapted in the public services. Very important. Yes, I think the first questions, what is the sustainable leadership through local wisdom, means that you have to find your strength based on your local values and wisdom. To govern the society means you have to involve them. So this thema actually very relevant to the local governments, because the federal governments, the national governments has only authority to design the macro concept, the macro policy, regulations. But in the practice, if you manage the people, you manage the local expectation, local needs, local citizens. Yeah, I think Malaysia is federal state, and the role of local government is very powerful, to deliver public services. We stop here or?
Okay. Can we?
For the first question.
For the first, for the first session. Okay, okay. I think that's a very key point that Pak Eko just mentioned. The fact that Indonesia is highly decentralized. You need one unifying factor.
Yes.
And you'll be very dependent on the ability of the state to deal with their local people, which is of diverse culture, beliefs, and values, but then converging it towards your country's goals. Principle. Yeah.
We have Pancasila.
The Pancasila, the light of our Rukun Negara.
Basic principle of nation.
Yeah. And I think that the other point, that the key point that you also emphasizes on the fact that when we come to public policy construct, enhancing your data and knowledge, authentic data and authentic knowledge is so critical in solving all your challenges, because you need to have a public policy that suits the people that you're dealing with. And if we do take the effort to identify the diversity of the community we're dealing with, chances of us ended up with authentic knowledge and data on the thinking and the beliefs of the people will be a lot better, and then our public policy may stand a better chance of getting it work. I think that's also a key point that Pak Eko just made. And understanding the societal practice in balancing human and environment become the basis construct of your environmental policy, for example. How much, I think Hani mentioned that, the Maurins actually indicate that their existence with the Mother Earth is in balance, and Pak Eko echoed that point as well in your case in your country. And perhaps considering that fact, that people do believe that we don't exploit our environment for our survival, but rather we have to basically become the steward of our environment for our survival, and embedding that into our policy construct. That's because that's a local belief. That was basically we have to know in order to. So I think those points are key points in addressing the community leadership, community public construct, or public policies that factor local wisdom. Okay, can we go to the audience? Your thoughts, your proposal, or your questions on the points that we just made. Okay, can anyone before we go to the next session? Okay, please. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We are proud of who we are.
Yep.
As a Maori, I'm from Borneo, right? He's from the UK, I assume.
Yes.
Yeah, he is. And Indonesia, just imagine from Sabang to Merauke. Imagine that, highly centralized, decentralized. Each and every one of you must have these thoughts. I want to be part of my culture, to be instilled in the federal level as a Maori. 20%. Do you fight for it in the federal level, right? You want yours to be in front. Like me, I want my Sabah culture to be here in Putrajaya. That's what I want, actually. That's why I come today, just to share the views and to listen to your thoughts. What are your views, gentlemen? Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I think it's. Thank you for the parts. I thank you for the question. Māori participation and representation at the executive level of government and legislative levels is probably we're overrepresented. If you think about, we're 20% of the population. We have about 27% of the seats in the House of Representatives in Parliament. And we have a handful, there's 20 cabinet ministers, probably 5 or 6 are Māori. Interestingly, they don't all share the same political ideology. And so just because I'm Indigenous doesn't necessarily mean that we all think the same, as you know. So that enables a voice at decision-making level, legislative and enacting that at the executive government, to progress the outcomes and values for Māori communities. Secondly, I think that because we have a treaty, and it's 200 years old though, nearly, but because we have that treaty, that has been the source of the authority, yes, the legitimacy of both New Zealand Europeans who have come to settle in New Zealand and the Māori who live there, and ascribing their rights as Māori, as Indigenous people, well, as Māori. And so that document, why I talked about it, is so important in us realising our dreams and aspirations to embed our culture in our land. How that's done though is tricky, and there's been 180 years of disagreement and colonial oppression and resistance, and then there's been a resurgence in pride and there's been reconciliation, and now we're moving into a modern era of adaptation, to use Professor Eccles' term. So, yeah, it is complex and it's a long journey, but that's been the Māori experience. If I talk really about what's happening recently, our younger generations are becoming empowered to think not like the previous generations, not like their parents or their parents' parents, their grandparents' generation. And one example is what Indigenous identity means to them in New Zealand, but also what it means to other young people around the world. And I look at what's happening in Palestine and in Gaza, and there's a very strong affinity for Māori, and young people in particular, young people at our university, and that's happening in universities all around the world. So I think that that Indigenous struggle, or that Indigenous mindset, if you like, to want to be connected to land, is manifesting in lots of different ways, and in the younger generation it's manifesting yet again. And so we are, in the New Zealand experience is that we are finding ways to stay connected and have a voice in our country, and want to share that identity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pak Eko.
Yeah.
On the same question.
Siapa tadi nama Bapak? Pak Khairul, terima kasih Pak Khairul. In the national level, Pak, we don't have any questions or conflict on where are you from. On the question of where are you from. Are you from Sabah, Sarawak, or from island of Malaysia? So the achievement of Sukarno and Suharto is to integrate our nations. So even though we have more than 1,340 ethnies, 715 languages, if you come to Jakarta, if you come to national level, you will be considered as you capable or not. This is the basic of merit system. We are not talking about where are you from actually. We are talking about how capable you are to be posted as a director general, to be posted as director, and so on. Yeah, in the provincial and the local government, yes, we are talking about the local context, about the ethnicity, local values, tradition, institution, and so on, in order to serve the community and citizen. But in the national level, fortunately, we don't have any discussions with the questions of where are you from actually. We are now integrated in the national political system and so on. So we are not talking about ethnicity based on the ethnicity. We are talking about the ideology, yeah. Fortunately, untungnya kita we finish with the discussion of the ethnicity background in the national level. Yeah, we follow the merit system, Pak. The merit system, the competencies, capabilities, past experience, and so on.
Yep.
Yeah, in the
forward,
national, Pak.
To be honest, Indonesia is still talking about this.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was the same question, Pak Eko. I wanted to know what was the challenges that you're facing. You answered that question. Thank you very much. Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. We are still on the issue of recognizing local wisdom to move our country forward. Do we have any more questions on this? But any more? Any ideas? Okay. Silakan, Tuan.
Very good morning, our panel speaker. My name is Farhan. I'm from the Land and Mine Office, Putrajaya. So basically, my first question will go to Mr. Horn. The Treaty of Waitangi, as you said, is 200 years old. What happened, just for sharing here, 4 million acres of land has been confiscated from the British because of the insurrection. Today, you talk about it for what happened in 200 years before. But today, New Zealand is among 4 governments that did not agree to rectify the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. I just want to know your your views on how, as you said just now, 5 over 20 NZ cabinet is from Maori descendant. Maybe they don't have the same ideology, same principle on that matters, but in here, Malaysia, we also have the multi-ethnicity, gap generation, different religious extremism, and so on. In fact, in terms of, we are a federal type of government, a monarchy with constitution. So I'd like to know, in terms of New Zealand local wisdom, how do you anticipate the local Maori citizen toward government decision on not voting toward that UNDRIP in UN? You understand my question? Right?
Yes, I do. Crazy, right? I think often Māori, the Māori indigenous experience is held as a example of one that is, has been relatively successful up until this point. The fact is, it's, internally it's not really. Our people still have the lowest rates of education and high incarceration rates, not too dissimilar to what happens in the United States or Canada or Australia. So there's some common factors there. I think some of those countries also didn't sign the UN DRIP, the UNDREIP. So I think there is still a strong determination by governments in those countries to want to manage their affairs. What I will say though is that that government, I think there was about 10 years ago that the centre-right government at the time decided not to approve the joining of that UN agreement. That's okay, and the reason why that's okay for us is that our orientation about our place in New Zealand isn't for just one generation. Our orientation goes back 1,000 years and goes forward hundreds more, if not 1,000 more years. So our thinking becomes what is not right necessarily right now for today, but what does tomorrow look like for our children and our grandchildren and their grandchildren. So with that in mind, when setbacks like that happen, or when we don't get consensus around government about, developing Indigenous aspirations, we just keep going. And we keep going, and we do it in a way that is increasingly is respectful of the people in the country. We don't have a lot of ethnic violence in New Zealand. There's no religious violence really. There's no those significant events that cause the problems that we see in other places in the world. So there's a unique understanding that we as Indigenous people will just carry on. We'll carry on until for our children and for their children. So there's that element to it as well. Sorry, your other parts of the question, sir.
I just want to understand whether New Zealand is really acknowledged for its Native Land Act. We have Native Land Act 1862, Native Right Act 1865.
Yes.
All these regulation, is it protect or is it suppress the indigenous? And what's important is how does the indigenous community perceive this? Is it the government is trying to, because we are trying to learning from our point of view how we want to deal with our, for me, land administration in Malaysia lah.
Yes. I'm going to say something a little bit controversial, and I'm not a lawyer or a political student either. But I think from an Indigenous perspective in New Zealand, from a Māori perspective, most acts of Parliament are there to control Indigenous rights, is my perspective on what the history of New Zealand has been. Most of the laws are there to control and put barriers around the rights. So what happens is so the Native Land Acts that you talk about were there to control what Māori could and can own, basically could and couldn't own. So what we keep going back to, and why I talked about at the start, is that the Treaty of Waitangi is the foundation, is the source of our rights. And then so what has happened over the last 40 years is a recognition that the Crown, the government, has not lived up to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, which assigned sovereignty over lands and customs and things like that. And so that's why we keep going back to it. And that's why we keep upholding it as the document that gave the British Crown permission to come to New Zealand and settle New Zealand. So in that regard, things are changing. The fact is that by 2040, 45%, I believe, 45% of the children born in New Zealand will have Māori descent. 45% of the children born in about 15 years' time will have Māori descent. So it's a matter of when, right? It's a matter of, and so everything that we're doing, all the work that's happened for the last 2 or 3 generations in particular, by Māori leaders and rangatira, we're all kind of building on each other's work, because we're going to realise a time where it won't be as severe as it used to be in the past, and that actually much more of the population will be Māori. It's very different, obviously, to the experiences in Indonesia. and elsewhere in the world. In fact, I think our experience is probably very unique to anywhere in the world. I don't think there are many countries to compare that kind of relationship between an indigenous group and the Crown, if you like.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Any?
Doctor, can I proceed with my second question?
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Hon, for your sharing. As I said, we are trying to learn any good. We can take it to our administration here. For Indonesia, for Doctor, actually, Malaysia is a federal government. We established in 1963 with collaboration with, we have our partner here from Sabah, from Sarawak. So the concept of federalism is we cooperate and we share the obligation and the amount of the importance of like for defense, education and so on. We have Schedule 1, Schedule 2. But then the scenario of our political event in Malaysia right now, we are heading to some sort like decentralization, as you said, Doctor. We have Sarawak with its own political association, organization, and it seems like Johor trying to be apart from the aspiration to create their own state level political party. So I'm just looking, is there any opinion from your point of view? We can see apart from the multi-ethnic city in Indonesia, the topography, the diverse, I mean like the broader size of the island. I think like 1,000 above island in Indonesia.
17,000.
17,000. Does decentralization, as you said, giving the local institution to practice their tradition, their local value, can be implemented in Malaysia, based on your point of view? Because we have Kelantan, Terengganu, and so on, and then we have Sabah, Sarawak.
Yeah.
We respect the MA63 and we are trying to advocate and achieve it. And as for now, I'm just looking, is the model in Indonesia is applicable in Malaysia?
Yeah. Good question. Yeah.
Yeah, it is very difficult questions because every nation has their own roots, historical background, and also political commitment. But I think
I just want to add some more, Doctor. This is based on land matters because my point of view is based on land matters.
Land matters.
In
Topography.
Indonesia, yes, in Indonesia, all of the development. As we can see, the IKN, IKN development in Kalimantan Timur, it was made by the presidential authorities, where the land matter is based on the national level power. Here in Malaysia, we have state level. Under our constitution, land is state matter. So we have Sarawak and Sabah with its requirement, and we have all 9 states in Peninsula with its power to dictate on the development. Federal government, we do in Malaysia, federal government, we cover the federal importance like education, medical. So how is it compared to Indonesia?
Indonesia, So based on local government law, the national level has only authority in 6 matters: foreign affairs, defense, security, justice, religions, and monetary. So only 6 authorities. Actually, 32 authorities or affairs have been decentralized to kabupaten kota, to local governments, to cities and municipalities. So in decentralization frame, you have authorities to regulate and authorities to manage. Educations, health, housings, infrastructure, public works have been decentralized to municipality. But the national government has to regulate the national policy, macro policy. So we call it in Indonesia NSPK, norms, standard, procedures, and criteria. So But it is also very difficult to the ministries. This is the weakness of our system, yeah. So every system has weakness and strength, you know. One side, the local governments, they enjoy very much with the autonomies. But the difficulties is the ministries in Jakarta could not effectively control and supervise the local governments because they have only NSPK, norm, standard, procedure, and criteria. So the minister assigned the national, for example, minimum standard for public services in education, health, and so on. But they cannot control the implementation. The implementation matters is the authority of local governments. So this is the weakness of Indonesians because if we respond to globalization, we need the fast response. So sometimes we need time, so delay, because we have to confirm the local governments. For example, we signed already the Sustainable Development Goals, so in the global level, yeah. But Sustainable Development Goals, I think 90% is matters of local governments actually, talking about the climate change in the local governments, poverty alleviations in the local governments, and so on. Yeah, I think now we are trying to have better coordination in sense of multi-level governance, global, national, provincial, and so local governments. So by integrating some indicators in the National Development Plan. So in the Ministry of Home Affairs, they have so-called Sistem Informasi Pemerintahan Daerah, so information system for local governments. So this is technology based. But in the national level, the Ministry of Plan has so-called Krishna. So we are going to integrate Krishna and SPD in order to control the achievement of indicators of development. For example, indicators of educations like rate of wajib belajar, ya, the mandatory access to education and so on. So yeah, we are in the in the process of making the multi-level governance better. Yeah.
So basically, while the national mission is so critical,
yes,
it is also important, as we have agreed just now, to recognize the local context.
Yes, local context,
and
local wisdom.
Yes, and the challenge should be coordinating the recognition of the local context and local wisdom to achieve the national mission.
That's right.
It's a constant challenge for almost all of us in this world. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
Great. Yeah. Actually, we have moved to the second session. Actually, I was about to ask what are the challenges in recognizing the local wisdom to achieve the national mission. I think we have basically addressed some of these points. But can we move on? Any other thoughts? Okay. If not, can I move on to the next quote-unquote topics that we would like to address now? We do just now address on the recognition of local wisdom in moving our country, incorporating our public policies, in leading our organizations for the effectiveness of the organization or public policies and for the country. Now, Pak Eko and Hani, what are your challenges that you face? What are the barriers that you have encountered in trying to integrate the local wisdom into your contemporary leadership of your organization, or perhaps at the country's level? You have mentioned briefly a little bit, if you want to emphasize that a little bit more. How do you foster the local wisdom within your community and your country so that they have the realization at the end of the day, the national mission is as important as my local community's mission. So the recognition of the national mission is also important. And how do we foster that feeling among the community that while it is important for us to address what we want, but we also must be focused on what the national needs, the country needs. And the other part is, does education plays a part in fostering this awareness?
Yeah. Okay, Pak.
Pak Eko?
Yeah, okay.
All right, okay.
Okay. Actually, we are facing three fundamental challenges now: globalizations, digitalizations, and the millennializations, the sitting generations. This is the most problematic challenges that we have to face: globalization, digitalization, and millennializations. So living in the global changing environment is very difficult, actually. But Indonesia is decentralized government, as I mentioned before. So the most challenge that we are facing now is the capability of bureaucracy. The capability, because you know the local level, the local public servant capability is very low compared to the national level. Yeah. So that's why the program now is how to strengthen the capability of public servants. So to understand. So we introduced since 2013, I think 11 years ago, so-called One Agency, One Innovations program. So every local government has to create in their own local government one agency, one innovations programs based on their own needs, expectation, local wisdom, and so on. So now we collected more than 24,000 innovations based on local wisdom, actually. Very unique, because in Kalimantan, in Dayak ethnic, they use Dayak tradition to reduce the poverty, to reduce the stunting problem, and so on. Very challenging. Through the One Agency, One Innovation, we strengthen the capability. So co-creations, so-called co-creations program. So our lembaga administrasi negara, National Institute for Public Administration, is giving advice to local governments to create the innovations. So in order to strengthen the capability of public servants dealing with the problem. Yeah. So our focus is to solve the problem of the society and community. So they have to understand the characteristic, the roots of problem in the community selves. What is the roots of problem actually facing in the local society? Yeah. This is, I think, the problematic. The second one is in digitalizations. So the digital divide. The digital divide. Yeah. Although we are using the local wisdom, they have to be introduced in using IT. Yeah. So digital divide in Indonesia is in the middle. Yeah. Right. So there are many regions, remote area, where there is no connectivity in internet and so on. So. Yeah. This is also one of the problems that we are faced now. In the sense of digitalizations. I think since we decentralize our authority to local governments, our task in national government is to make sure that they are capable in doing innovations for public service delivery to citizens. Yeah. This is my comment.
Okay, so Pak Eko, you were emphasizing on the capability of the bureaucracy.
Yes.
In actually promoting co-creation.
Yes.
Between the inter-ethnic and fulfilling the mission of the country. Do you instill it in any way in your education system that co-creation and recognition of strength from each other is critical, is important, whether it be at school level or be it at the university level? Is there a specific agenda on this particular subject on recognizing diversity.
Yes, yes.
And creating strength through that diversity through co-creation. Is there any specific approach in that?
Actually, the local government has their own authority to develop the curriculum in the education. Yeah, one of the curriculum that we develop now is the local language. So my children, we are living in West Java, so they have to learn also West Java language. I mean, they learn Indonesian language as national language, but also they learn local language. Local language. So to maintain the locality. So every province could develop their own curriculum based on local wisdom.
And then they could perhaps translate that into the Indonesian language when it comes to co-creation.
And also they learn the culture,
the
local culture, the traditions. In a local culture that exists,
I think you pointed out very well that the fact that you have a local language that describes your local beliefs, your local culture, and at the same time you have a national language that you are adhering to, or you could speak, then you can translate the local belief, the local culture that is embedded through your local language through the national communication.
Yes,
and that would really foster a good co-creation, because I personally believe that communication is so important when it comes to co-creation. People need to understand why you do it, why and what are you doing.
Yes.
And if you are tasked to bring up innovation through your local beliefs at the national level, the ability for you to communicate at the national level is important. Yeah. So I think that would be a good strategy to for example, the living of the Dayak people in how to survive in their land. How do you communicate this at the national level through the national language is perhaps the best way.
Yeah, I would say we finished with the diversity in Indonesia. Our most problematic problem is governance.
Right.
This is the constraint of Indonesian to be developed countries is governance. But diversity, democracy, finished in Indonesia. So we talk democracy in the real democracy. We talk diversity in the real diversity of the language, ethnicity. One of the problem is how to develop governance.
Yes, and that need to be done through governance. You can't avoid it.
Yes, that's why. That's why the National Development Plan on bureaucratic reform, governance reform is very important for us. So how to create a capable, accountable governments, transparency, and so on.
That's a very good point, very important point you're making. Recognizing the diversity and communicating it through a proper governance to enhance the country's strength.
That's right.
Because every community has their strength, and you must first recognize it, and then communicate it on a platform, and translate it into the governing it. Thank you.
You are
Hani, you want to add in on this?
Yes, thank you. We have the opposite problem in New Zealand. Somewhat. Last 30 years, we've come a long way in terms of recognising Indigenous identity and using that identity and elements of our culture to benefit New Zealand as a whole. Some examples of that are in international trade, where our distinctive stories about New Zealand enhance or add value to the New Zealand brand and the products we sell and the commodities that we trade in. We also, Māori have added value internally as well to become a more accepting society of different views and ways of living. Began to happen in the last wee while is that there is some political view that the pendulum is swinging too far towards acknowledging Indigenous aspiration, and that it's beginning to potentially create problems for non-Māori. So an example is the last government in New Zealand introduced the ability for local government, councils, to create seats on their council, elected seats, for Māori communities, so that they have a voice at the table. So you might have 20 councillors for a city, and one or two of those seats, depending on the size of the Māori population, would be elected by Māori people living in those cities, to ensure that there's representation at local decision making. In the last month, the government in New Zealand has passed a law that says if you want to keep those seats, you have to have a plebiscite, a referendum in your city to say that your city actually wants to have those seats, because it was up to councils themselves, the elected members, whether to have them or not. That's democracy, right? But it in no way supports or promotes Indigenous or cultural aspiration or Indigenous or cultural rights in our land, as defined by the Treaty of Waitangi. So, very different experience, but we're and now venturing into areas I don't know a huge amount about, but it's not unusual in New Zealand that this is happening. It's happening, I think, in the United States. It's happening in the United Kingdom. It's happening all around the world. And so there is, as in the last maybe 10 to 20 years, there's been a progressive movement forward around acknowledging Indigenous people. And that's regressing politically a little bit at the moment. And so that's a challenge for us in our country as an Indigenous minority. Second part to that, I'll just give a very personal experience from, in my work. We, at the University of Otago, we're the oldest university in New Zealand, 155 years old. And for 155 years, we used our identity was essentially born out of our Scottish heritage. So we're Dunedin, where we are, a tiny town at the bottom of New Zealand, close to Antarctica nearly. It was 0 degrees when I left there 3 days ago, so it's freezing. It's winter there. Anyway, Dunedin has a very strong Scottish heritage from the settlers that came, Presbyterian settlers that came from the UK. And the university decided, it's a very mainstream university, decided that it wanted to change its identity. It's still got the same name, University of Otago, but it wanted to adopt a brand that was more reflective of our place in the world. So we're not in Edinburgh, we're not close to the North Sea, we're in the Pacific Ocean. And so we wanted an identity that spoke to that. Most of our staff, most of our students, and most of our alumni were supportive of that move. They agreed, that they said it actually makes sense. But we had a very significant but smaller proportion of very influential people who were absolutely dead against it and made it. You know, the challenges for us were incredible. Negative news stories, withdraw of donations from the university, potentially, hundreds of thousands of dollars was withdrawn. And the issue really comes down to, identity and pushing aside one identity over another. And I think what we realised is that there is a fear, it might be real or it might actually be irrational, that we're leaving behind the old New Zealand and we're moving into a new New Zealand, one that embraces our diversity, our indigenous people, our indigenous rights, and our uniqueness in the world. You know, we're so far away from everyone. We're so far away from Britain, it's not funny. And yet, you know, it scares people to know that actually we're not going to be like that. And you know, that's not us anymore. It was in 1950 when Britain used to buy all of our butter and milk and lambs, and we were the richest country in the world. We were richer than the United States, richer than the UK, France, everyone, because we had an open market and everyone was buying our stuff. And those were the good old days. Those were the good old days of Little Britain and New Zealand. It's changed, and the world changes. But the challenge for us is how we, you know, how we engage and through the next few years, through this idea of identity. And so I think for us, very different again to Indonesian experience. We're a tiny island at the end of the world. But that's some of the challenges that we have at the moment.
Sure, please, yeah.
Because, we have a problem on integration in Papua. Yeah. In Papua, so indigenous people. But we are trying very hard to integrate them into the local governments. So we have a national program for indigenous people in Papua, 3,000 young graduated from Papua to be integrated in the ministries and agencies, so that they can learn how to manage the government in the national quality level, yeah, and so on. And we will also transfer these 3,000 young people back to Papua. So now we created 4 new provinces in Papua in order to strengthen the local autonomy in Papua.
Okay.
So we have also indigenous problem in Papua, the indigenous orang Papua. Yeah, but we are trying very hard, through the creating more local governments, provincial and so on. So giving the more authority to be autonomy in making policy and also serving to the citizens.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any points to raise from the audience on this matter? The challenges. But I like the point that Hani.
But
sorry.
So in the Indonesian history, in 1928 we have satu nusa, satu bangsa, satu bahasa.
Yeah.
So the declaration of Sumpah Pemuda. One nations, one state, one country, and also one language. This is very important, Pak.
Yeah.
So yesterday in Malacca,
Yeah.
I taken a Grab, the Chinese driver. So I talk in Melayu, but he didn't speak Melayu. Why? How come? This is the problem of Malaysia, I think. To be honest. Yeah. Yeah, this is the point. I think I talked to Professor Kamal, you have to solve the problem. Otherwise, you cannot integrate your
You have to be able to speak,
ethnicity.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the big problem. Sorry, I
sure, yeah.
honestly to speak this. Yeah.
I had another experience when I was in Singapore. I took a train and then I took a taxi to go to a place. So I had one, the taxi driver was 60 odd years old.
Yes.
He doesn't use Waze. He speaks to us both in Malay and English, and he could maneuver himself, and he could tell this building was what it was before, what was this, that was a 64 years old man. And then I came back from that place to the train station, but this time I have a millennial driver. He's perhaps only about 20 odd years old. He uses the Waze and he doesn't speak anything. The 64 years old do not need the Waze and can tell me what was this place before, what happened here, and yeah. So in other words, we are very much dependent now on this, communication-wise and direction-wise. we don't have to speak and just yeah, I mean, I can say that is between inter-ethnic and intergeneration diversity we are also dealing with at the moment. Yeah, and I would like to take up some point that Hani was pointing out just now. While you want to support the recognition of indigenous culture to be a recognition of unity within the diversity, but be also mindful about the concept of democracy, where it is very much ideology driven, and if some ideas are being dominating, and in the pretext of democracy, that could be a challenge on the intention that we want to have. If there is a bulk, or rather a big number of people who disagree, or rather who would agree on domination rather than recognition of unity within diversity, then within the context of democracy, that may not work to achieve what the level that we want to get. Yeah, so be mindful of democracy. Okay, any yes, please.
I have one question or input to Mr. Hani Paul. Perhaps my question is in a small scale of not globalization or national level.
Sure.
Because I've attended UC of Otago for 2 years, 12 years back.
Alumni.
Well, while attending the course there, I noticed the local people, the community, embedded to the university community. When UC of Otago have the talk on sustainable, whether in the elements of economy or environments or economy, environments, and one elements of sustainable, the community will join the talk. You see, so the people of the community will become a leader. Leader is among them, right? So with that values, how you inculcate that values? Because of that values, the leader from the community will bring that values to their leadership into the national level. So I wonder how Dunedin inculcate that values, or how University of Otago inculcate that values among your community, into that environments of sharing. It's not just students involved in that talk.
Okay.
You can see Maori or non-Maori people. When I ask them, are you from NGO or anything? No, I'm just a community.
Okay.
So how you inculcate that values? Thank you very much.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Good to see you. Dunedin's a great example of a kind of a microcosm of the nation. So far away from everyone, and it's quite hard to get to. As you fly if you want to come from anywhere with a big population. So the university has intertwined itself with the community, and vice versa. I think been 155 years that the university's been there. And so the community feels that it owns the university, and likewise the university is only there because of the community.
So it's not an ivory tower.
It's been described to me as the most, by my previous boss, who was the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, he said to me that it was the most decentralised university in Australasia. So if you talk about ivory towers, there are none to be seen really, in terms of that the power base, if for want of a better term, is decentralised. And so that describes the ability for the communities to have real ownership in the university and the ideas that come out of the university, because they're not a there's not a central ideology. Interestingly, though, the identity exercise that we undertook last few years, that was a centrally driven idea. but it was based on the university's desire to want to be something different and chart a different path forward into the next 20 years or whatever. And the anchor for that vision was our place in the world, Dunedin and Otago, the region, and the fact that we're surrounded by the Pacific Ocean with beautiful mountains and lakes everywhere, and you know, if you've been there, you know what it's like, and just how unique of a place it is in the world. There's nowhere else like it. And so that was the strategy and the vision was to be that. And the reflection of our identity now is our place in the world. So, and hopefully this has touched on some of your things. I think in summary, you know, there is a devolved involvement of the community in leadership practice at the university and in ideology and ideas. And the university complements that with a vision about where it wants to be. Thankfully, most of the university community agree with that vision. You know, we worked for many years to take people on a journey to say, this is where we want to go. And we're going to do it with mana whenua are the local tribe, basically, the tribes, the indigenous tribes. I'm not one of them, but I'm from another one, but we have them there. And we worked alongside them. So it's a journey that we've been on. It's not perfect. It takes a while to get everyone on we call it a waka, a boat. It takes everyone a while to get on the same boat and to paddle in the same direction. Actually, working at a university like Otago, someone said to me, is it like a big tanker? You know, it takes ages to turn the ship. I describe it as a flotilla of 1,000 boats all trying to go in one direction. You know, you've got little sailboats, you've got big ships in the harbour, and you're trying to get them all to go in one direction, and they're not. So that's what the university's like in Otago, you know. But on the vision piece, everyone agreed, actually, this is where we want to go, this is what we want to do. You'll have people that won't agree, and our strategy there, which is probably a good way to describe where New Zealand's going, is we, I think, try to just get everyone onto the fence. You're not going to get everyone over the fence, but if you can get them on the fence, then you're halfway there, right? And so you're going to forget about the people that are way down that end of the spectrum because they're just never going to move. So don't waste any energy over there or resource. Just work on the people who are on this side of the fence and get them on the fence, and then use the others as advocates to take the journey forward.
It's the journey that matters, really. Great, thank you. Any more? No? Okay, can we move to the last segment of our discussion? We're talking about future. Yeah? We have spoken about recognizing local wisdom. We have talked about challenges in recognizing local wisdom. Now let's talk about the future. What lessons can other countries or regions learn from the sustainable leadership initiatives in incorporating local wisdom in your organization, in Indonesia and in New Zealand? Would you want to share with us? What is your outlook at the end of the day, Waiko? How would the lessons that you have learned now basically construct the challenges that we're going to be confronting later in incorporating local wisdom in our public policy, in our leadership approaches? So what would be the potential things that you will see that we should anticipate? Maybe some of it have been mentioned just now, but you would like to emphasize a little bit more on particularly what would be the outlook going to be like, and what trends and developments within the country should we take into consideration as a key point for us to really put our effort in constructing local wisdom in our leadership. Like, for example, the globalization now, the digitalization, the connectivity, basically could put us to one standard to a point where we are just thinking alike rather than thinking in diverse forms. So we're looking at the future. Any thoughts on this? Yeah.
Yes, we cannot avoid globalization and digitalization. We cannot avoid millennialization because this is the global tendency and also challenges. I mean, we are now in the way to harmonize between the universal values and local values, actually. If I can divide or differentiate the way we are going ahead in the policy, in the macro policy, I think we have to have basic principle.
Okay. Yeah.
Basic principle of nations. For example, we have in Indonesia Pancasila. So Sukarno and Suharto and also the predecessor of them are trying hard to make Indonesia as nations by implementing the Pancasila, 5 principles of way of living of Indonesians. So beliefs in God, humanity, persatuan Indonesia, ya, musyawarah and deliberations, and also justice. This is 5 principle with 36 the guidance of living for Indonesian peoples. We introduce this in the macro level. This is very important as basic for nation in our country. In the middle level, I think the local government, provincial and also local government should be given the autonomy to define their own way, their own local wisdom, culture, and so on. This is what we did in 25 years after fall of Suharto. So giving them the authority and autonomy to defend their own selves. So the macro level, the central governments supervise, control, advise, make sure that all guidelines should be effectively implemented in the local governments. So this is, I think, in the middle level, the local leaders should be open the opportunity to the citizen to participate in the policy making process, giving them the access to get the document and so on. Make suring the participation of the citizens. So enhancing the legitimacy or acceptability of the people to the local governments. Second is to strengthen the capability of public servants to understand the situation, roots of problem, to find the solutions of problem and so on. And to create public value, creating public value. Very important, creating public value. This is in the middle. In the day-to-day activities, in the operational level, in the pattern of interaction level, I think we have to create co-creation government. Co-creation government means that local leaders, public servants should go down to the community, talk to the community, in order to co-create the solution of problem in the policy making process. I think this is three level that we have experience in Indonesia, macro level, middle level, and pattern of interactions. This is my answer.
Sure. Yeah. So basically, the future that we would like to have is do have the recognition the local community contributing towards a national mission.
Yes.
And they must be recognized
That's right.
in
Yeah.
terms of their beliefs, values, and cultures. So that's the way forward. And for that to happen, you must draw out the basic principles in this, that we do take into account of the existence of the local community's culture that should be tuned towards the national mission. That would be, correct me if I'm wrong, Pak Eko, yeah. And the local government should be given the authority to defend themselves on instilling the right local values that would contribute towards the national mission. And I like the point that you also stated just now, create a public value. The values of recognizing, the values of respect of some of the key points. Yeah? In other words, there is no domination in a nutshell. There has to be a unity within this diversity. The diversity must be recognized. Yeah. Thank you. Very insightful. Thank you. Yeah. Honey, you have
Thank
anything
you.
to add? Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Kamal. On this point, I think I agree entirely that the New Zealand experience about the success of integrating local indigenous wisdom, very similar in terms of what works and what's successful. So I'm going to copy a couple of words that Professor Eagle talked to. First is there's a concept in Te Ao Māori, in the Māori world, called kanohi kitea. Kanohi kitea is to see your face a lot, your presence, you're there.
Yeah.
So taking that principle, the idea of the concept or principle of stakeholder engagement becomes absolutely critical to getting people over the fence or onto the fence, or even if they just absolutely hate what you're doing, at least you've made the time to go and talk to them and tell them, we're going to dam your river, or we're going to build a building over here, or we're going to change your name. So that, in my experience in Otago and in the Māori experience, traditionally I'm part of a marae. A marae is a traditional town, a small traditional village, and most Māori communities used to base themselves in marae. And what you do is if someone dies, or there's a meeting, or there's a wedding, or there's a celebration, you turn up to the marae and you show your face. If someone from another marae dies, or there's a major celebration or a major event, or something happens, they need help, you turn up and you show your face. So this idea of kinship connectivity manifests itself in stakeholder engagement. And so in your community, so like at the university, this idea that we went out and we talked to people and told them what we were planning to do, we told them the vision, we said why we were doing it. We didn't have a lot of, people might have said, not on board, but at least we took the time to do that. So I think that's the first thing, in terms of the future and the lessons. The second, again, I'd like to endorse is around participation and co-creation. From an Indigenous perspective, I think having the opportunity to co-create, co-develop, co-lead ideas, solutions, particularly if they pertain to Indigenous wisdom and there's some benefit to the broader community, that's also very, that's critically important to ensure that there's some authenticity and legitimacy to what you're trying to achieve. And I think the last, and Professor talked to it as well, is we just need brave leadership, brave leaders who are willing to be unpopular, who are willing to be, attacked on X or Facebook or whatever, or in the media, may lose a bit of face. But brave leadership is critical in adopting change and sustainable leadership practices and innovation and adaptation. And that's certainly true in New Zealand. Most of the amazing, great people that I think about, political leaders, community leaders, were brave. Not necessarily, people didn't all like them, but they were brave and they achieved good things. They were good people and they achieved good things for their people and for Indigenous communities.
In other words, leaders must have that vision of having the diversity within that community. Through co-creation and through harmonizing the community, we create the nation together. I think that's basically what we. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have much time left, but if you would like to put a few more questions on your thoughts on the future of incorporating local context or local beliefs and values through local wisdom in driving the nation. Anybody want to have your thoughts put up here? Anyone? You might want to. Okay. Younger generations. What's your outlook on this? Anyone? Pak Johari. Pak Eko mohon Pak Johari beri pandangan.
Terima kasih. Saya ada dua soalan. The first question to Professor Eko. You made a point on decentralization just now.
Yes.
But you also shared that criteria, standard, procedures are determined by the federal government. Was there experience where certain area being disadvantaged by all these criteria and standard? And if you have such experience, how do you manage people who are disadvantaged by the national standard and criteria? To Mr. Hone, New Zealand has been very successful in Olympics, and even your football team can go to the World Cup. And not to mention about your famous All Blacks. Yeah? So what kind of local wisdom that you have to have such excellence in sport you can share with Malaysia? Thanks.
I love your All Blacks haka before they start. Yeah.
Thank you, Pak Johari. I think province and local governments in Indonesia, cities, kabupaten, kota in Indonesia enjoy very much with the autonomy, Pak. So the ministries in national level design only the standard, the national standard. So they can find the local standard with this national standard. The problem is, I think there is a plus minus in the system. The problem in Indonesia now is it is very difficult to control the result of development in local governments because they are very autonomous. So that's why now we are in the national level. So I'm helping the government now as executive secretary in the program of the bureaucratic reforms. How we can make sure that the strategic plan in the national level could be effectively implemented in the local governments, because Indonesia get used to be centralized state in the era of Soeharto, so 32 years. So in 1999 we decentralized fully, so from centralized state to decentralized state. So I think 25 years after decentralizations, we learned much how to strengthen the capability of local governments in order to manage their own authorities. So now we are very much trying to make sure that the capability is there. So after the capability is developed, I think it's okay, everything, because the most problematic situation that we face now is the capability of local government that are very, very low, in sense of strategic management, performance management, change management, stakeholder management, also risk management, for example. And I think we understand that digitalization is very important. So we are using the technology in order to integrate the national development program into the provincial and so local government, so that we can easily monitor and supervise whether the indicator have been achieved or not in the local level. This is the problem that we are facing now, Pak. How to make sure the multi-level governance working very well. But through the technology, I'm sure that we can easily achieve solve this problem. Thank you.
Honey, you want to talk about All Black?
The All Blacks.
Thank you, Paiko.
I think cultural values are very. New Zealand's cultural values are unique. So there are aspirations and manifestation of our European heritage and our Māori heritage, Indigenous heritage, and I've seen in national teams examples where Māori values are intrinsic to the way they train, the way they plan, the way that they operate as a team. So those values are become, I guess, norms within sports teams, high performance sports teams to follow, and so a couple of examples. Whanaungatanga. Whanaungatanga is essentially kinship or connection, and so our All Blacks or high performance teams have ways of connecting with each other in a Māori way, or in a distilling those Māori values. Tikanga are laws, basically, customs or laws, and so they help with discipline in a high performance team. And then āhuatanga is your or āhuatanga is the way you are, and what I saw at the Olympics is the pride that our athletes had. Well, every country, you're proud if you win a gold medal, but our triple gold medal winner, Lisa Carrington, is a Māori from the same tribe as me, and the pride of that she's won eight medals at the Olympics in the last 6 years, 3 Olympics, gold medals. For a Māori woman from little old New Zealand, it's incredible. So the pride that she has as a Māori woman to do that, and that talks about āhuatanga and connection to your identity and your whakapapa. So there is local and indigenous wisdom that is evident in those high performing teams, and then they put a uniform on. And that uniform, it's usually black because that's what New Zealand is black for some reason. And but there'll be cultural motifs and cultural designs that identify them visibly as New Zealand, and celebrating that Māori identity. So it works well for us on the world stage.
Thank you for the response. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are really, we are out of time already by now. So, but I would like to just recap a little bit on the outcome of this conversation. I think at the end of the day, this is what we have agreed upon, or rather this is what we've been talking about, that we do need to recognize the local values, local cultures, and that is embedded in the local wisdom to drive our organization or nation for that matter. And the challenges will be our capability to govern this integration of the local values, local cultures through the local wisdom in driving our organization and even our country. And finally, Paiko brought this up. How could we in future be able to harmonize these local values versus the national values versus the global values as a way forward in our organization, and the universal values, there you go, as a way forward. So it's a journey for every one of us, but this is a journey that is noble in my take, and is all about recognizing everyone and empowering everyone through our authentic approach. So I would like to take this opportunity. Can we give a round of applause to our speakers? Thank you very much, Pak Eko. Thank you, Mr. Hani, for sharing all your thoughts and your ideas. And life is always a journey for us. And thank you, everyone, for making your time in this conversation. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much.
Waalaikumsalam.